Oh, boom, no longer off air.
No longer.
Hello, everybody. We are live here at the Attention Era Media Studios overlooking beautiful downtown Milwaukee. You're watching hour 19 of our 24 hours of live Google Hangouts celebrating Community Manager Day, all kinds of different topics with people from all over the world. We're celebrating actually 6 years of CMAD, and then this is our third year doing this. Over on the right, right over my shoulder here, actually, is the Zoom board. So all of the rich tweets, Instagrams, things like that, on the hashtag on CMAD show up here. So don't forget to do your hashtag CMAD selfies if you haven't done them yet today.
And the rich tweets too, not the poor tweets.
So, all right, we'd like to give a special shout out real quick to our award sponsors that will be giving away an award real soon here. That's BTC Revolutions, Flockler, Higher Logic, My Community Manager, Online Community Results, socialmedia.org, and Sprout Social. So we're the gang from My Community Manager. I'm Brew, co-host here at My CMGR, and also Director of Awesome with BTC Revolutions.
Hey everyone, I'm Sherry Rohde. I lead Community and User Experience at Rebellion Media and co-produce CMGR Hangout here with Brew.
Hey guys, I am Dom Garrett. I am a freelance social media specialist for hire, and I enjoy hanging out with these guys, helping out my community manager.
Awesome. So we're going to be talking in a minute about Beyond Vanity metrics in your enterprise social network. Before that, Dom, we have an award to give away, right?
We do have an award to give away.
Good.
Big thanks, first off, let me just say to absolutely everybody that nominated anybody, the wonderful awards committee, who all of their names are actually listed on the awards page. If you go to cmad.co/awards, you can go through the posts and see all of them. But the award that we're giving away, we only have 2 left. The one that we're going to do is Let's Take This Offline, the best at activating in-person events. And we had one person in this category that was nominated quite a few times, and the awards panel really felt that he did a great job. So the winner of this is Alex Shabar, who was actually on a panel with us earlier. So if you go, you can find him on Twitter. We're going to tweet out his name. You can find him on Twitter at Alex Shebar, and you should ask him to get together in person because that's what he's good at doing. So,
yay, Alex!
Yay, Alex!
Yeah, tweet that guy. Clap it up, internet. All right. All right, Jackie. We'll just hand things over to you and take it away. We're excited to hear you guys.
Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to our panel, Beyond Vanity Metrics. We're really fortunate today to have a mix actually of enterprise, so internal community managers as well as people who focus on external social. So we're going to get a really good, broad, diverse mix of answers across both of those types of community management, which is really helpful. So to kick us off, we'll get everyone to introduce themselves. So I'll start. I'm Jackie Musgrave. I'm a consultant with the Ripple Effect Group here in Sydney, Australia, and we work on better connecting people through technology. So I've been a community manager, both an internal and external community manager, and now consulting, helping other people do both community management and actually work with some of these platforms and get more out of them. So I'm just going to read from my left to right and throw to people. So this is in no order of importance. I'll throw to you, Annie, if you can just introduce yourself.
So again, I'm Manny, and I'm the community manager on eToro OpenBook, which is the world's largest social investment network. So basically, our community is centered around the financial markets and trading the financial markets, and it goes hand in hand with the company as a brokerage. So that's a little about me and my open book.
Awesome. Brian?
So hi everyone, I am Davis, and I am the Director of Social Media Marketing with CPXI, and we are an advertising and marketing agency based out of New York, but I am actually talking to you from our New Orleans office, where we have a group of about 10 folks that are developing owned and operated media platforms, including Pressroom VIP and hiphopmyway.com. And a lot of what I do on our strategy side is focus on analytics and the development of reporting and tracking measures to identify the type of content that works well for us, and also looking at internal tracking on how quickly we're able to develop content and focus on initiatives that get us the most views and the most content pieces shared with what we are developing. So very glad to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you and Annie on the panel. Kai?
Sorry, just had to unmute there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. My name is Kai, and I'm involved in two companies. I'm a partner co-founder of a company called Optimize, and we do social network analysis consulting, which basically means we help organizations map and improve relationship patterns between staff inside organizations. Then I'm also the CEO and co-founder of Swoop Analytics, which is an enterprise social network analytics firm. And what we do, we take feeds from ESN platforms and then mine them to understand what are the sort of the social capital that's being built inside organizations.
Awesome. Thank you. Mark?
Oh, hi, everyone. My name is Mark Woodrow. I'm a Customer Success Manager for Yammer and Office 365 based in Sydney, but working across Australia, New Zealand, and APAC.
Thank you. And Marissa?
Hi guys, I'm Marissa Ferraccio. I'm the digital marketer at Zoom. We are a social media engagement platform, so we power the visual side of social media, but also the analytics and the geo-targeting in the back end. Really excited to be here and talk to you guys, and I'm excited to see that the CMAT Awards are underway and been following that all day, so thanks for having me online.
Awesome. It's great to have all of you on the panel. We did have one other panelist who's having some laptop issues at the moment who may join us, but we're going to kick off and get started with the first question. So what I wanted to start off with is a fairly broad-ranging question. Why do you think it's important to measure your community? Throw to anyone.
I'll say it's important because if you don't measure it, then you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what you should be doing or why you're doing what you are in fact doing. And I think that that's been a big trend, I would say, across the industry the past couple of years, where a lot of us, and I will admit to this fully, that we all went out there thinking, oh my God, I have a Facebook page, and look at all these likes I have, and not ever understanding why we were doing what we were doing. And measurement for, especially us, now that everyone out there is a publisher in the space, analytics and measurement allows us to identify where we're spending our time and really understand how our community is interacting with us. And especially on an internal level, also with analytics, as I mentioned before, we really didn't have an opportunity to focus on what we were doing with content development, but analytics helps us to focus our efforts on developing only content that will resonate with our audience. So can't speak enough about what I do every day with spreadsheets, and as boring as it may be, it is effective. Data nerds.
Brian, working with Microsoft, we have lots of people with spreadsheets, and I must say that it's really, I'm a great believer in community management and enterprise social, but you really need the analytics to combine with the great stories, the qualitative things that we can find out through our community, but you need some of the quantitative sort of stuff to convince people to sort of allocate resources in the long term. There's no two ways, you can't get away from it, and I know with my bigger customers, whether they're banks or what have you, the question really comes up about why are we resourcing this and what's involved. And I think ultimately great communities have, there's a great other ways to justify it, but you do need some regular analytics to combine with the fantastic stories.
Yeah, I'll piggy. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just, yeah, I mean, what more can you add to those two things? It's getting harder and harder, and I'm glad I managed to step in just before you. um, uh, you're right. I mean, the old saying, you know, if it doesn't get managed, or if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, I think is partly right. I think the other part of it, it really motivates us when we see what's happening and we can get some trend data and we can see that things are moving. We can get immediate feedback on whether the things we're doing, whether they work or they don't. I think that feedback loop is so important for us to create effective action plans.
I'll just piggyback off what you guys have been saying. I think it can help you learn about your community a little bit with the right analytics. You can understand and identify what people are saying about you and really kind of hone your message. Looking at the analytics and fully understanding what's resonating most with your audience and listening to them and seeing, you know, what's being said, it can help you use those analytics to really power your future endeavors on social, instead of just like blasting things out with what's being the most effective. Understanding what's identifying most with your community and really listening to their needs will help you formulate your social presence moving forward.
For me, it's just about finding more opportunities. So the more you kind of look at what's already going on, you can kind of weed out what's missing. So when I need something done, I basically work my way backwards and I kind of look at what I need and then sort of step back and see what else is going on and where I can find loops, basically.
Excellent. I definitely agree with all of those points. I think you can't make progress or move forward from some sort of baseline. You can't prove that you've got success. You can't prove that you've had a certain incremental success, and to Mark's point, need further resources and all of that kind of stuff. You're not constantly tracking. So I'm going to actually slightly swap the order of the questions. So I apologise to anyone who might be reading through the list of questions and expecting the next one. I'm actually going to now throw to the question about vanity metrics. We hear that term thrown around quite a bit by community managers and social media professionals. And typically when we talk about vanity metrics, we're talking about things like likes and followers, and we've touched a little bit already in the first question. So this question, what I'm really wondering is if you guys see that there is value in actually tracking those metrics. They may not be the only ones we want to track, and we'll talk about other metrics as well a bit later in the panel, but do you think there is actually value in tracking those sort of vanity metrics?
Can I start just from a personal perspective? I think empowering the, if you like, the end user to understand the effects of what they're doing, I think can have a great motivational impact on you. So from and I see that, you know, I think all of us who've got LinkedIn accounts will go in and say, well, who looked at my profile? You know, who reads my post? And it gets you feedback, and I think it motivates you to do more. So you can call the vanity metrics. I think they're, from an individual perspective, they can be quite motivating, and from that perspective, I think they're quite good. Now, are they going to fix our communities? And not sure, but I know as fuel for individual energy, I think it's fine.
I know there's one thing that is kind of a vanity metric that we measure at Zoom that I know really gets people's attention. So when we're collecting data and we're talking about how many people are tweeting about a topic, right? So like State of the Union, for example, or the Super Bowl, you want to know how many tweets were collected or how many Instagram posts people took of the game. The one metric that we have is how many people you reached, right? So you had 90,000 tweets, but you've reached 4.5 billion people. Well, now, we all know what does that reach actually mean, but I think the whole motivating factor behind it is a great point, because it helps motivate you to see, yeah, you may have all these tweets and maybe you haven't actually reached 4.5 billion people, but there's potential. And I think that potential behind that, there's a lot of potential and power, and that motivates you to keep on going. When you have a really hot topic or when you're focusing on something that you really want people to engage with, knowing your reach will motivate you to keep going, whether it's accurate or semi-accurate or a little bit, you know, objective depending on who you talk to. But that's a vanity metric that we use that's powerful when you're dealing with people that are trying to measure their success. And it's silly, but it means a lot, I think.
And to build off of that, let's be honest, a couple of years ago when we all started this, there was nothing but vanity metrics. We didn't have the benefit of how robust Facebook's insights are. We didn't have Twitter analytics. We only had the number of tweets that were coming in, the number of followers that we had. And going off of that, it was always a good strategy initially, but even then, vanity metrics were only a one point in a larger strategy. So I think vanity metrics are definitely an important gauge, especially when showing those metrics to the client, because God knows there are a number of folks that really don't care about your message penetration, your time on site. They just want to see how many likes we have. But as one part of a larger tracking, performance, and analytics plan, vanity metrics have their place.
Yeah, Bob here. Sorry, I'm late. I would say that for network maturity, it's the vanity metrics are important to start off with. But yeah, as your network matures, then you start to move away from the number of users, which the Exco like to hear about, and getting into how many problems have you solved this week, or how many connections have you made across regional boundaries. So certainly maturity, network maturity comes into whether vanity metrics are useful or not. And as you educate your direct reports up, then it's useful for them to learn with you as your network grows.
I mean, I think the social behaviour is reflected in our social networks, and to ignore any of the vanity metrics is to ignore what sort of social behaviour that drives drives people and people are interested in. So I always find as an indicator of people who have zero interest and just poo-hoo followers and those things, especially early on in a case, it usually people are sort of very dismissive of really what social's about, and they'll never get to those bits about business value and projects and the social graph and all the other things that come out of working in a transparent way.
I think that sometimes these otherwise superficial metrics can actually kind of get you to the next step, because if they're already giving you these little bits, you can kind of pull more from these people. So an example out of my own community would be that we encourage people to actually copy off of one another with their trading. So the whole idea is wisdom of the crowd. And through eToro as the broker, they have the ability to actually allocate their money onto somebody else's trading and let that person essentially trade for them, so automate whatever that person's doing. So for me, when I see new people getting followers, for me it's one step below getting new copiers. And of course, copiers means more money into the company, more money into the system. So for me, those are bigger potential than somebody just coming in and spending an hour on the site but not doing anything or not interacting with anyone. So I think that sometimes they can present other opportunities for you.
I think all of those are really excellent points. I would agree. I think there is value in so-called vanity metrics. I think where they got that name from, I guess, is this kind of popularity contest concept of we have the most likes or the most followers, so therefore our account is, the best, or we have the most people getting likes, in our enterprise social network. So since people are liking things, people must love everything and everything must be going fine. I think where we run into some potential issues is when we rely too heavily on those and don't start investigating things at a deeper level and trying to really get some sort of business value out of what we're doing and trying to align some of those metrics. So we'll jump into what was supposed to be the second question, which is to ask you guys what kind of social data is important for you to measure in your organisation, in your communities, and how are you measuring the effectiveness and the usage, if not just by, say, likes and followers?
One of the ones I'm trying to measure, with some difficulty, but it's getting there, is to measure sort of connections across the boundaries, across the regions, sort of delving into the data and seeing how many people from different countries are getting involved with each other. That's one of the sort of deeper non-vanity metrics, which is a little harder to explain to people, but it's certainly one which I think gives notice of how well the community's functioning in getting information out of sort of siloed business units in various countries and getting that knowledge surfaced to the top. So that's one of the deeper metrics that I look at, which is a challenging one to find out about. So, but it helps.
And I'll add in that I think for us, we have very specific metrics because we operate as publishers, and a lot of the metrics that we're looking at are not just isolated to the platforms. We're looking at social networks like Facebook, like Twitter, like Pinterest as one part of our publishing strategy. And we have metrics that tie from, say, the number of engagements or retweets that we have and how those activities mesh up with what we're looking at on our owned and operated websites. Time on site, page views per session, interactions that we have with particular pieces of content, whether it be a video or an MP3 embed. And I think it really depends on what your larger strategy is. And fortunately, the way that the industry has been moving, everything is trackable now, or most everything, and we're only getting more and more data points that we can start looking at. But the issue with that, I think, I ask everybody here, is that there's a point at which you have so much data you don't know what to do with it. And this question of big data, how much data do we need? When is it too big for us to manage? That is something that we've been looking at a lot, and trying to connect those points is another challenge in itself.
Brian, I think don't completely agree with you. Just in our enterprise social space in Yammer, I think Kai can elaborate, but there are things that we would really like to measure that are really and away from the vanity metrics, that around behaviours that are actually quite difficult at the moment to actually get sort of information on. So not everything is actually covered in terms of behaviours and what happens in groups and in business value within enterprise social networks. And I think that's a slight difference from just doing external social with Facebook and etc. and Twitter, where you've sort of got a different way of sort of looking of what the behaviours you're trying to track. Kai?
Yeah, just on I guess most of my experience lies within organizations, and one of the things that I think organizations are, and you heard sort of Bob talking to that as well, we need to move away from the pure vanity or the activity-based metrics and start to understand what are the relationships that are formed on these networks, and what sort of metrics do we need for that. Most organizations in our experience are using enterprise social tools because they want to enable people to connect and collaborate sideways in the organization, and Bob was talking between countries, an example, or up and down the hierarchy. And getting information of that, I think, is where we start to get real insights about how these tools are impacting organizational performance. From an individual perspective, I think you need to have reciprocity, trust, two-way interactions happening. And if you start to get measures and metrics, analytics that tell you to what extent you have these two-way interactions, or whether that's top-down information being pushed out from the corporate communications team versus it's people that are talking to each other, I think those sort of metrics will become in the future much more insightful and important than simply the number of users, the number of logins, and the time spent on the site, which are okay, but I see them within from an enterprise collaboration context as being the early set of metrics, and we need to move ourselves from these early activity-based metrics into the relationship metrics.
Yeah, Kai, I really agree a lot of with what you're saying with regards to the two-way interaction. with Zoom being a SaaS platform where we have to, as a software as a service, our big concern are our customers and what's their feedback, how do they feel, and for me, when I'm dealing with like a social media aspects, when I'm working on engaging with my community socially, to me the engagement is the biggest factor. In my opinion, the number of followers, the number of favorites doesn't indicate how much engagement you're actually having with your community and how effective you're actually being. So I would much rather see a much higher engagement rate and seeing people actually going and clicking on my links and viewing things on my blog and viewing things on our website than favoriting or retweeting or how many people are following me. So for us, from a customer service standpoint, the engagement rates are very, very important. When we're talking about driving traffic, obviously the conversion rates are what we're looking for because we are a B2C platform, and we want to make sure that people are purchasing our products and we're benefiting from those analytics the most. So I think it also depends on what your community is doing and what you want, but having that understanding of what's important to you can help drive your strategy.
Thanks for that. I wouldn't mind just making a comment on eToro because I think that's a fantastic example, written up, by the way, by MIT professor Sandy Pentland, who wrote a book called Social Physics, I think it was last year, and he uses the eToro system as an example, and he's measured the kind of relationships that those that do best on eToro they have. And it's not those; it's those that have a combination of tight networks, but also a loose network. So they have a close core, but not just completely closed. They've got a diversity of relationships, and I think that those kind of metrics is and it's the example with eToro is great. It's great because it's millions of transactions and millions of users, and we can show a direct financial correlation between having that kind of your network, the relationship-based metrics, to a financial metric. I think that's great.
Yeah, so for us, we use, or at least in the community, we use engagement to basically drive our sales because we use opportunities in the market to get people excited about instruments that they want to trade on. So yeah, what you're talking about is the study that MIT did a few years ago with us, which was, does copy trading and social trading really work? And what they did find was that people who are copying other traders are generally more profitable than people trading on their own. But at the same time, as you say, people diversifying their portfolios and getting to know different kinds of people in the community and copying different kinds of people rather than copying the people that everyone is going after, again, are more profitable. So it's nice to see that interaction and to see, that they're actually making money just from making friends, really.
That's pretty awesome, making money from making friends. I'd like to try some of that myself. I think these are all really good points. I think something that stood out for me is I think a little bit of that difference, just going to that sort of relationships and the two-way interactions and that sort of stuff. And I think that's a little bit of a difference where we're trying to measure community versus trying to measure a network or our social efforts or our broadcasting, publishing, and things like that. I think when you are trying to measure community specifically, one of the key things that you need to be able to get to is that activity and interaction between individuals. Who's speaking to who, how often, those kinds of things. Not necessarily the content of those conversations unless there's some sort of antagonistic relationship going on, but how many people are connected with one another, who are the nodes, who are those really important people in your network who are actually bringing, certain groups together and crossing, creating those sort of bridges and all of that kind of good stuff. And I think also the point about big data, well, I agree with both Brian and Mark. I think there is a wealth of big data available in the external space. I think there are a lot of data points that we would love to see available to us in the internal space that aren't necessarily quite there yet. But what I do think overall, whether we have that data internally, and certainly with the data we see that is available externally, is really, there is a wealth of it, and the key of it really comes down to what insights we can derive from it. And I'm not sure that there are that many people out there doing a great job with it at the moment, possibly because there's just too much of it. So I think we'll see some interesting stuff in that space during this year. It's been such a buzzword for the last year or so, and I think we're getting to the point where we're past that. It's hype, and it's the thing we're talking about to where we're going to see some real advances, which I think is really interesting. So the next question actually kind of follows on from that question, which is, so we've talked about sort of some of the data that we think is important to measure, but just want to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the metrics that you have found specifically within your communities and your work that have been the most effective in demonstrating value, whether that's back to your executives or if it's back to the community itself. Just an example of some of the metrics that you found most effective in showing that value.
I'll start then. I mentioned this in the earlier panel. For me, I care about the likes because within our community, you cannot disable notifications on threads right now. So a lot of people get really irritated when they're joining a discussion or they're participating in something and then they just get overwhelmed with notifications of new comments. So I know that that irritates them. So when I can present, you know, something to them and just say, like this if you're listening, or, you know, this is important and I want you to acknowledge this somehow, then they'll like it or they'll share it, and then I understand that they've heard it or they've seen what I've shared with them. So for me, that is important, and it's come up time and again that I've been able to pass this along and say, this, my message is going out to people. I'm purposely not asking them to say anything back or do anything other than just acknowledge that they've seen it and you know, done whatever I needed them to do with it. So I do actually care about likes in this sense, because I know that I'm kind of working off of what I already know about them, and they're still giving me what I need.
I think those are awesome metrics, and just hearing you talk about, it's interesting how every industry has their own metrics to be looking at, and I emailed Jackie a similar question about this just because I was thinking about our metrics that we look at tracking, and a lot of the tracking most people do, looking at the engagement that they're getting or their post interaction level, but working more on the customer service side of things. And I would argue that social, no matter what industry you're working in, that there is the customer service aspect of it. But looking at your service level, how often are you responding to the content that's coming in, your retweets, your favorites, and then also the response time? And I think that's been a big shift in social the last couple of years. And you can look at platforms like Sprout Social, Woot Woot, I know that they're a big sponsor today, but if you log in, one of the first stats you see is your response time and your interaction level with your community. And so for us, those are two stats that a couple years ago we wouldn't have tracked, but now it's not necessarily the people that are coming into us, it's how often we are interacting with the people within our community.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think that's super important. Response time is crazy. Like, you have, what did they say, an hour between tweets before you're expected to respond, you know, and even that seems like a really crazy long time. An email, if you don't respond, you know, something's wrong. So the response time is huge. I know for me personally, I use like, we have a time of day feature, and because we have clients internationally, it's important for me to understand when they're posting. So, for example, like the State of the Union address that happened last week, you know, obviously that was a nationwide event. It was really important for me to not only know what local cities were talking about and what the trending topics meant the most to them, like their sentiment, but also time of day. So if you know, for a specific example, that you're really focusing in on, you know, Texas or, you know, the West Coast, and you want to know when they're tweeting and when they're talking about you, and you want to find those influencers, you need to be able to understand when they're talking about you, right? So having those time of day analytics, or having you know, identifiers like Z-Points or your Clout Score, where you're seeing who are those big identifiers and who are your big influencers and when are they posting, that's going to help you with your community engagement, and that's going to help you when you're driving your social strategy. So those are things that I look for as well. I mean, obviously, like what Annie said, like the likes mean a lot. But for me personally, that helps me understand certain parts of my community, because we're not, I think with social media, you're no longer confined to one area, right? Even if you're a small business, you're looking to always grow and looking to always expand. And when you're dealing with social, it's a worldwide network. So being able to understand where those analytics come from and how they pinpoint that community in a specific time zone is really, really valuable and really powerful. And you're going to reach that community a lot faster.
I think I'd say that I think there are different audiences for analytics that have different objectives and therefore different things they want from the analytics. And that ranges from an individual person who wants feedback about their post and includes some about the vanity metrics we talked about before, but other things as well. A measure of their social capital, how many mutual relationships do they have, and those sort of things. At the community, or I'd say in the business unit level, what we've heard many organizations like, and again Bob was alluding to this earlier, is to understand within the organization how we connecting across side up and down or sideways. So it's a different audience, it's a different metric. So I think at the individual level, what we're hearing is people would like to hear about how they're traveling, and at the organizational level, they'd like to hear about how the business units are going. Are we connecting? Is the tool being? Can we demonstrate that we are connecting sideways in the organization? I think it's a very important metric the organizations are looking for.
Yeah, I think just jumping on Kai's point that about sort of different audiences. Certainly, internally within the company, for instance, the corporate communications, they do care about number of likes, number of views, number of comments, the vanity stuff. That it just depends on how socially mature each of the departments are. They actually do care about that sort of stuff. So you need to respond to your company's needs and your customers' needs internally and say, well, if that's the metrics you want, then that's the metrics you give them. Whereas they're getting more onto away from that, then into the deeper stuff, cross-country communication or cross-regional communication, which you can actually show real, so a different level of value to, my CIO, he needs to know that sort of thing. So certainly, I think respond to your audience within the company, certainly from my perspective, what they need to see, and listen to them, listen to what they ask for, because if they don't get what they ask for, then they won't use your platform.
Yeah, that's right, Bob, and I think what's interesting in the enterprise social space is that all organisations are slightly different. So what their actual requirements will vary, because to make by definition a good enterprise social is a reflection of the culture and to the sort of the business drivers. So the metrics will vary somewhat, and the one that I find particularly useful is any metrics around groups, because a lot of interesting behaviour within organisations, enterprise social networks, happen in groups. So, and it can be as basic as what the type 5 groups are, but it also what new groups are formed, and watching that activity, I think, is a really interesting reflection on sort of some unique nature of each enterprise social network.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm going to jump in. Is that you, Bob?
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think all of those are really very good points. I think an example of metrics that I have seen a lot of people starting to use in enterprise social is a look at using the inbuilt questions feature in a lot of those platforms, and looking at how many of those, a percentage of them that are answered, how many are being marked correct or helpful, where that's something that the platform allows as a way to demonstrate that people are actually both information seeking and information sharing within the platform. I think it's quite a relatively easy piece of data to pull out, provided the platform, behaviours have been built within your users that can be quite powerful in demonstrating value. And I think also it was a really good point about responding to your audience, as in it's great that we want to be able to demonstrate, X amount of business value and all those sorts of things. And I think it's not just great, it's really, really important. But I think there's different audience for that. And as the point was made, and I apologise because I didn't write down who actually said it, that some people do want to know as simply as, how many likes and followers and pages. And I think You know, if that's the information that they need to see that the platform's working and that's going to keep them happy, that's great. But there's always going to be a need, particularly at sort of the higher level, at your executive and management level, to be able to demonstrate a deeper value than just saying that, you know, 10 people logged into our platform today or whatever it might be. So just in the interest of time, I'm actually going to kind of wrap the last two questions into one. So the last two questions were, one was about collaboration as a specific use case for enterprise social networks, how you might measure and report on that. And the other question was how you can use community data to demonstrate business outcomes. So these are all flowing on from some of the stuff we were just talking about. You kind of wrap that in together and think about community data both from an internal and an external perspective. I'd also throw out there, I guess, is not only how we might measure collaboration or how people are working with one another, whether that's internally or externally, but also of the data that you currently gather, is there something that's missing that you think, you know, would be really valuable to be able to measure on that we haven't touched on? Basically a kind of a free-for-all question here about measuring value and showing, really demonstrating those outcomes. So not just value, but actual business outcomes.
I'll jump in here just with a really quick one. Coming from an actuarial background, it's all about the dollars at the end of the day. And one of the things I do is for the Q&A groups, for instance, I'll take a metric on how many questions and answers have been asked and responded to, and then multiply those by the hourly value of the people who are responding. It's crude, but it's a good proxy for you to go and say, well, you know, subject matter expert on $4,000 an hour, and he answered 8 questions, which means that he's effectively saved the company X number of pounds, because every time that question's asked again, then they have an answer there straight away, and he doesn't have to answer it again. And the exco really love that sort of stuff. So you're saying, well, there's $20,000 saved a month. You can really take that off bottom line and off budget line items, and it really works. They love it, and they know it's a proxy. You know, you explain to them what's going on, and they know it's a proxy. So yeah, it's a really good one. I would heartily recommend it. You know, exco eyes light up when they see dollar signs.
I was trying to remember that there's a platform out there, a dashboarding platform that did something very similar to that, but it was actually baked in. And I just remembered Fan Page Karma, and not that they're paying me to say that or anything, but well, they're a German company. And what I thought was an interesting measure is the organic shares and organic interaction that you get, and they equate that with a dollar amount of what it would cost you to reach that number of people through Facebook advertising. And I thought that was interesting because it's very similar to the way that journalists would measure what your paid placement would be for a story. So if you had to pay a newspaper to get X number of column graphs, that would be something that would cost you $500 for that type of placement. But you getting a writer to place that in the story, it's interesting that these crude metrics, because we can't measure the value of a like yet, right? I mean, there are a number of people that have tried to do that, but coming up with these crude metrics of value, it probably goes back to this earlier point that we were talking about. It depends on your network. It depends on what your ultimate goal is. If it's page views, you can probably come up with a metric for that, but if it's organic interaction, if it's brand awareness, there's a totally different valuation for it.
Well, Brian, think about what you just said. That was perfect. Like the impressions. I mean, years ago when advertising was, you know, the big dollars, was where you put all of your effort before social media became so big, they measured it on impressions. I mean, you want to know how many impressions your TV ad was getting and how many homes were going to see your ads. That's a vanity metric right there. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to resonate with somebody, or that they're going to actually take action and purchase your product or pay attention to who you are. So the impressions, you know, even though it's a vanity metric, it's still super important. And if you think about that, you know, they've just kind of transferred over into social. And if you do social right, you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money in ads. I mean, it's part of your social strategy, obviously, but when you're doing social and you're looking at the impressions and you think about the amount of money you spent on impressions for advertising and for media relations and for PR, you're spending a lot less, and your cost per acquisition or per client is probably a lot lower, and you're not having to waste all those funds on advertising. Not saying that you shouldn't advertise, but just as a social media example.
As a sort of deeper dive into collaboration and business outcomes, actually some of the best examples I've seen is when they deliberately use an enterprise social network for a specific collaboration exercise, and they run it in the community and then report back on the outcomes. And I've seen, a big transport department in Queensland do this when they looked at ways to reduce graffiti. They just ran it on a 1-hour session on their social network, and they found a way to save millions, within that hour. And it was quite a direct business outcome from an activity that they did on their social network. And I've seen banks do that when they've sort of had campaigns for friends and family, offered through an enterprise social network, and then, sign up new people. So I think we need to sometimes take what's an overall network analytics and then sometimes boil down to a specific activity around collaboration and business outcomes and report back on those.
Mark, that's spot on. In my experience, when it starts with, oh, here's the tool, what can we use it for? That's that's the wrong way around. If we start by saying, well, here's a problem that needs to be solved, what's the best problem to solve that? Or what's the best tool to solve that problem? You want a winner, and then the business metrics follows naturally, as you said. From that, once you know what the problem is you're solving, you can demonstrate how you use that. I think the interesting thing from a social perspective is that we can start to engage and demonstrate that the decision making or we get input now from a wide variety of diverse different people in our organizations. And as with the eToro example, has shows clear scientific data shows that when you have a diverse set of people involved, then you get better outcomes. And I think that's the opportunity we have to show them through our analytics that we have had in a diverse number of people involved in solving problems. But those problems are not some that are just they're rooted in a business challenge and a business issue, whether it's graffiti or something else. But that's where it comes from. And then we just use the tools and the analytics for the tools to show how they contributed to solve that problem.
Awesome. Sorry.
Just one of the things, like last year, just towards the end of last year, we had our sort of best business case competition, put forward the sort of, as Kai says, how we solve business problems in various aspects, like employee engagement or question answer. Yeah, those sort of things that really help, and you have to solve actual business problems. I really agree with that, Kai. It's the only way that, for internally anyway, it's the only way that you can sort of prove value if people can see that you're solving actual issues that come up within the business.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate all of your insights. I think it's been a really interesting panel, having the mix of sort of internal and external focus, so that we're sort of covering a really broad range of expertise. So big thanks to Annie, Bob, Brian, Kai, Mark, Marissa for joining me on the panel today, and I'll hand back over now to the community manager team.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you all you guys. This was a fantastic panel. I know a lot of people that I talked to are really looking forward to it. So thank you very much for all of you guys' info, pushing through having 5-month-old babies as a reading chat. We got a lot of other stuff going on. So yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
And to everybody tuning in to catch the next show, you can go to cman.co, click on broadcast schedule, and you'll be able to find the next topic, which is change management, migrations, redesigns, and upgrades. Oh my! So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.